Started. Welcome to the 2026 budget hearing for the Rochester City School District, the City Council budget hearing. I'm going to ask the clerk to please call the roll of the Budget, Finance, and Governance Committee.
Councilmember Gruber?
Here.
Councilmember Martin? Councilmember Smith?
Here.
Vice President Harris?
Here.
President Melendez?
Here.
Thank you.
Thanks, and let the record show that Councilmember Leslie Smith sends her regrets. She had work travel planned well in advance of this budget hearing being announced. And also, I want to note that both Councilmember Lupien and Council Vice President Harris, as employees of the district, are not allowed to participate in the deliberations or the vote. They are allowed to be here, and Vice President Harris has chosen to be here, but she will not be making any remarks during the course of this hearing. Before I turn it over to Dr. Rosser and President Simmons, let me just note for anyone who is watching at home, the City Council has an opportunity to vote on the Rochester City School District budget every year. That is in part a function of us being the taxing agent for the district. But our vote is predominantly ceremonial, maybe ceremonial at best. And that's always been something that this body has kind of pushed back against, that we are asked to vote on something that, whether it's yay or nay, doesn't actually have much bearing on the outcome of the school district's budget. That's still the case this year, but we are appreciative that the school district gave us an opportunity to have this hearing prior to the full school board vote, which is, in the next couple weeks? Is that right? So we appreciate the opportunity to at least give you our questions and our input in advance. To the council members up here, I will probably, because it's a fairly light crowd among us, I'll probably just go down the row a couple times and let people ask one or two questions and circle back rather than going section by section. But feel free to kind of let me know if you want to piggyback off of anything anyone else is saying. So think about that. And for now, I'll turn it over first to President Simmons to make any remarks and to introduce anyone that you'd like to introduce.
Thank you, Councilman Gruber. I would first and foremost like to acknowledge my board colleagues who have joined me this evening, being Vice President Malloy, Commissioner McCullough, Commissioner Griffin. We have online with us this evening Commissioner Santiago, and my understanding is that Commissioner LeBron and Feynman will both be joining us later this evening as well. And I'd like to acknowledge you all. So good evening, President Melendez, your Budget, Finance, and Governance Committee Chair, Councilman Gruber, and the members of the City Council. I am Camille Simmons, and I currently serve as the President of the Rochester City School District Board of Education. I come before you this evening in my second year as board president, deeply aware of the responsibility this role carries, and even more aware of the responsibility we all share regarding the children of Rochester, New York. Budgets are more than numbers on a page. They are choices that carry weight. They have consequences. And in a school district, those consequences are felt, first and foremost, by our children, our families, and the people who serve them every day. This budget is difficult. I want to be honest about that. I am concerned about the choices before us, and many members of our community are as well. I hear the concerns from families. I hear the concerns from staff. I hear the concerns from those who are looking closely and asking whether this budget will truly support students in every facet of their lives. Those questions matter. They are questions we should be asking. For me, the center of this budget must be students first. That means that academic achievement must be front and center. We cannot talk about the future of Rochester without discussing whether our students are reading, writing, thinking critically, solving problems, and graduating prepared for college, career, and life. So as we review this budget, it is imperative that we look carefully at how it supports the acceleration of academic achievement. I am also looking at how it strengthens early grade literacy, how it supports students with disabilities, multilingual learners, mental health concerns: school climate, attendance, and the conditions that allow learning to happen. It is also recognized that acceleration in learning cannot be done in isolation. Students do not arrive at school simply as test scores. They arrive as children with gifts. They arrive as children with challenges, families, histories, and futures that depend on adequate social, emotional, and mental health supports, as well as the decisions we make now. So as I stated, literacy does remain one of my deepest priorities, but there are so much complexities we have to consider regarding our children. I want to be clear that we have to continue to examine this budget with care. And we are still waiting state allocations. And while I do not want to suggest that the overall direction of the budget will take some dramatic change, we are still waiting on those allocations. We must remain focused on targeted adjustments, which are most needed, and that will create the greatest impact. The partnership between the City of Rochester and the Rochester City School District is essential. Our students are not only district students, they are Rochester's children. Their safety, their learning, their health, their housing stability, their access to recreation, and their sense of belonging are all connected. And with that, I just want to again acknowledge that we are approaching this budget with seriousness and concern, with clear focus on students. You all have received a packet this evening. One of those packets, or one of the items in the packet, would be a letter from the Department of the State Education. And in that letter, you'll see the seriousness of where we are as a district financially and that responsibility we have. One of those things is asking us to even look at reducing the amount of fund balance we use. So we are in a critical state, and at this time, I appreciate the opportunity to make these statements.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the rest of the commissioners who are here. And let me turn it over to Superintendent Rosser for any introductions of your team, if you'd like, and any introductory remarks you'd like to make.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gruber. So good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon particularly to President Melendez, Budget, Finance, and Governance Committee Chair, Council Member Gruber, esteemed members of the Rochester City Council, and members of our public. Thank you for the opportunity to present the Rochester City School District's preliminary budget. I appreciate the chance to be here today as we continue the important work of aligning our financial decisions with the needs of our students, families, staff, and broader community. This proposed budget is grounded in both urgency and responsibility. It reflects our commitment to delivering a high-quality educational experience to every student while also confronting very real fiscal realities that continue to place significant pressure on urban school districts such as Rochester. At this moment, that work is made even more challenging by the fact that the state budget remains unresolved, leaving important questions about final aid levels unanswered as we move through our local budget process. Even with that uncertainty, we have developed a budget that remains focused on the priorities that matters most. Those priorities including strengthening our instruction, supporting safe and supportive learning environments, investing in early learning, expanding opportunities for students, and preserving the services that students and families rely on each and every day. This budget also reflects our continued commitment to the district strategic plan, the Board of Education goals, and the long-term work of building a stronger and more coherent school system. Over the past 9 months that I've been superintendent, I've taken a comprehensive look at our organization, its structure, its systems, and our current capacity to meet those goals. It is evident that there are deep-rooted challenges we face, and they must be addressed so that they can be sustained over a long period of time. However, I am confident that through our district-wide transformation efforts, we will drive meaningful improvements in student outcomes, leading to higher graduation rates, expanding the opportunities available to our children beyond the school environment. But I want to also acknowledge up front, as we heard President Simmons indicate, that this has been a very difficult budget for a number of different reasons. Several budget uncertainties remain that will ultimately shape our final budget. At this time, the preliminary budget does not reflect confirmed federal and state revenue streams, including state aid, title funding, IDA allocations, and some grant funds as well. That said, there is encouraging news. Since the publication of our budget book, we have received confirmation of nearly $1 million in philanthropic support, a $3.5 million increase in school improvement funds, and $1.4 million in receivership funding. These additional resources are not reflected in the budget books that you have before you, as we have allocated the funds to reinstate positions and to galvanize our programming for our students. At this time, part of my responsibility is to present a budget that is grounded in fiscal reality. That means being clear about what we can sustain, realistic about the constraints we are operating under, and disciplined in how we align our resources. This does not make the impact of our decisions any easier. However, it does make the rationale clear. One of the more significant shifts reflected in this budget is the district's use of an equity-based allocation model that ties school staffing more directly to student enrollment. We know for the past decade, student enrollment continues to shift in the Rochester City School District, where we see more students leaving the district versus more students coming into the district. This shift has led to increases in our pupil allocations per the schools, staffing for special education, community schools expansion, and the restructuring of the Office of School Culture and Climate, because the mental health and safety of our students are top priorities. It includes the opening of 2 new pre-kindergarten centers, strengthening our childhood continuum, and expanding access for our youngest learners. It also includes a new parent center, which represents an important investment in stronger support and engagement for our families. We are experiencing an increase in the need for more intensive supports for our students with exceptionalities. Rising service demands and compliance obligations have shifted the provision of services and staffing for students. One effect of that change is an increase in contractual costs for special education paraprofessionals to support service delivery for these students. This budget reflects continued investment and priorities central to our strategic plan and the needs we have heard from our community. It reflects difficult choices, though it also reflects deliberate investments. It responds to financial pressures while also continuing to implement the strategic plan in meaningful ways. I am grateful to the partnership that we have with the City of Rochester, the City Council, and for the shared commitment this body has shown to the well-being of Rochester's young children as well as its citizens in general. We know that student success is shaped by more than what happens inside the classroom. It is strengthened by strong partnerships across government, schools, family, and our community. This is why we elevate a school, home, and community approach to addressing the holistic needs of our children. As we move forward, I ask that you continue to partner with the district. Together, we must remain focused on what is required, not only to balance this budget, but to build a stronger future for the Rochester City School District students. It is my pleasure at this time to introduce members of my cabinet who lead this work tirelessly, serving our students, staff, families, and general community. Deputy Superintendent Dr. Cassandra Wright, Chief of Staff Jamie Wilson, Chief Financial Officer Robert McDowell, Chief Communications and Intergovernmental Affairs Marisol Ramos Lopez, General Counsel Adrian Neal, Chief of Operations Jacob Scott, Chief Technology Officer, Glenn Vanderwater, Chief Academic Officer, Jennifer Cody, Chief of Schools, Susan Ladd, Ed Muscadri, and Rhonda Morian, Chief of Special Education and Diverse Learners, Christian Swan, Chief of Innovation and School Reform, Marlene Blocker, our State Monitor, Jaime Alicia, and our financial consultant who was online, Mark Potter. Thank you for your time, leadership, and continued support of the Rochester City School District. We look forward to answering your questions and sharing more about our preliminary budget. Dr. Gruber?
Thank you. Thank you for your remarks. Welcome everyone to City Hall. I want to start by just acknowledging how difficult this budget year must have been. You both mentioned it in your remarks, but I can't imagine what it's like to be a government entity that is so reliant on both federal and state funding, and just to have so much uncertainty from both of them. And typically you wouldn't have that kind of uncertainty from the state this time of year. I'm sure that makes everything infinitely more difficult than it typically is in an already difficult environment when the feds are regularly threatening public education dollars. So I completely accept the difficulty. And I don't even want to talk about the numbers at first before I pass it off to my colleagues. I do just want to reference something that I mentioned last year, and recognizing Dr. Rosser, you were not here yet during the budget hearing, nor was Mr. McDowell. But as I mentioned last year in this very hearing, the RCSD budget is just simply not a transparent document. It lacks any narrative. I don't know. It was really hard for me to read this budget. I can't imagine how difficult it is for every single stakeholder that the district has, be it parents, prospective parents, students who are interested in their budget, staff. I don't know how you're supposed to make almost anything of this budget. There's virtually no narrative in it. There's narrative in the at a glance section, and then when you get out of the at a glance section, there is virtually no narrative for the rest of the entire budget. It is numbers. I mean, President Simmons, you talked about how budgets are more than numbers on a page. In this case, this budget is literally only numbers on a page. There's no words. I implore you to please read the city budget. I'm not going to say that the city of Rochester's budget is a perfect document, but what I can tell you, and what I think my colleagues can attest, and what community members can attest, is that no one can sift through our budget without having a sense of what changes happened and why. This budget doesn't even offer comparisons to previous years. I can't tell what changed from this year to last year because last year isn't even in the document in most cases. So it's incumbent upon me to be able to then go back and compare it to last year's budget. It's all, like I'm going to say this multiple times, I am rooting for RCSD in so many different ways. I'm sure everyone else up here is too. All I want to see is a successful district. And this is completely aside from the money, which is going to be a hard conversation too, but this is in your own court to tell people what's happening and why, to offer comparisons, to share what's going on. I cannot make heads or tails of what's in here. We're going to talk about it tonight, and we have the privilege of having these conversations, but I won't say it third and fourth time, but I've never seen a document that is more sparse with actual words. And I think for most people who are not CPAs, they're going to want to understand, why did this change happen or that change happen? I just don't know how anyone's supposed to make heads or tails of that besides hearing from you, which thank goodness you all are doing the rounds and making your presentations. But I really encourage you to take a look at the City of Rochester budget. We recently invested in a software called OpenGov about 3 years ago, spent a lot of money on it, and it is a tool that any citizen of Rochester can go look at OpenGov, which is linked from our website. They can click around, they can find comparisons year over year, they can ask OpenGov to say, hey, how did this budget line change from this year to this year? What's the narrative for why it changed? And it presents all that to people. You don't need to invest in that if you don't want to, but I would politely suggest that this is not satisfactory to anyone in terms of how it explains what changes happen. So let me move on to a couple of specifics and some questions, and then I'm going to start with President Melendez and go down the line, and I'd ask everyone to start with 2 questions, and we'll circle back if there are more. But I want to start with, again, where I find it hard to understand what the consistency is. So I'm just going to pick a specific school. I picked School 25. I have no connections at School 25. I don't know anyone there. I just picked it for that exact reason, actually. It's on page 26. So in School 25, what I see is that enrollment climbed from 281 in 2023 to 24 to 521 in 26-27. It's a gigantic change. Of course, the year-over-year change is only the 3.78%, but I have no sense of understanding how did it go from 281 to 521 in such a short period of time. And then I come down and I see a couple of numbers and I understand, okay, there's a proposed budget increase of 19 students, and yet the budget difference is, at grand scheme of things, $2,000, 0.03%. Now I have to imagine the nature of introducing 19 new students into a school costs more than $2,000. Whether that's school food revenue, supplies, equipment, but I have no way of knowing. And so I guess I'll just use this as an example. How do you expand enrollment at a school without commensurately expanding budget?
Thank you very much for the question, and I have taken note to looking at the City of Rochester's budget and also exploring OpenGov as a potential opportunity for the Rochester City School District to provide more detailed narrative around our budget. School 25. So School 25 quite some time ago merged with School 2, which is why there is an increase in enrollment from 2023 to now what we're projecting for 26-27. And over the years, the funding for the school has reflected the enrollment of the student body.
Okay, so just in this particular example, I know it's small numbers, but I want to hone in on this. So you're expecting from 25 to 26, 19 additional students, a 3.78% change. But the bottom line is a $2,141 change. And my guess is that 19 more students has to equal more than $2,141 extra dollars. So that seems to me to be maybe I'm wrong about that, but I assume just school food, supplies, materials, etc., has to be more than $2,141 for 19 students. So how do those things jive? How do they work together?
So the biggest line in this particular school is the compensation, and one staff member who may retire can shift that total number. So we see a change of approximately $100,000 in compensation. We see that there is a decrease in the equipment. We see that there is a change in the contractual line of $79,171, and there is a increase in the supply line of $24,000 as well. During our budgeting process, we provided each of our building principals with full autonomy to be able to articulate how they would like to spend their operational dollars. What we have before you are the operational dollars. This does not include food service because it's a different fund, and this does not include any capital projects. And it may include, or it may not include, special aid. And the reason why I say it may include, because if at the time the special aid was identified, then the building principal had the autonomy to then allocate the special aid. In this situation, given that this is a draft budget book that does not reflect the $4.9 million that I mentioned earlier, this draft would not reflect those dollars. However, when we publish our final budget book, it will then reflect the total amount of monies that are going to be allocated to each of the schools.
Got it. So in this case, just to make sure I'm following along, there's potentially one reduced staff position, and I understand that's not necessary. This is just in the draft, that 100,000. There's additional contractual and supply lines, but the principal has said, I can accept 19 more students without having to add any additional dollars. And the food service, the special aid stuff, that's all aside. That's kind of what each principal has looked at their school profile and says, I can do what you're asking me to with what I have here.
No, our building principals understand, and this is where the disconnect is. Our building principals understand that there is more dollars coming. Our building principals understand that this is a draft budget that is only reflective of the governor's run. And as I mentioned earlier, we're anticipating more dollars. We received $4.9 million in additional funding, in which we have allocated to each of the schools, and the building principals understanding that these are additional dollars to support that very finite projected number of students, have already allocated in our system, which is not reflected in this budget book, where those dollars should be appropriated. So if the question is, will School 25 receive more than $2,141 for the 26-27 school year? Overall, the answer to that question is yes.
Got it. Okay, I have some more questions, and I'm gonna pass it along. So we'll go down the line, starting with President Melendez, and then we'll circle back.
Thank you, Chairman. President Simmons, Superintendent Rosser, thank you for, and actually everyone here, thank you for being here tonight and giving us an opportunity to ask questions pertaining to the budget, proposed budget. I guess I'll speak a little bit high level first, and then I have a couple quick questions. I do want to echo what Councilmember Gruber said about the concern over the lack of transparency in this specific budget book. In addition to no narrative, I kind of went back and looked at previous budget books that we received. One of them is here. It's about 3 times the size of the current budget book, with less expenditures overall. And by comparison, just to kind of float this is the city budget book underneath that with a ton of detail, and we have half the money. So I think the transparency question comes up every year, so this is not a new conversation. It's not something that, obviously we have different processes and protocols in place, but one of the things that I'm concerned about is the amount of conversation or the amount of hypotheticals that are up in the air. So when the city of Rochester gets a budget from the mayor, as an example, the mayor doesn't touch the budget again. We get the budget, then it's in council's hands. It's in our purview to figure out, are we going to make any amendments? Are we going to try to push back on certain elements of the proposed budget? And what's been put in front of council anyway is we got a hard copy of a book, and then we were told a week later that there's a new copy of the book online available. We had our staff do some review of that, and I don't know if there is another iteration, but we're at least 2, maybe 3 iterations into this budget, and I don't know how to follow. I don't know how a community member can keep track of all the changes that are occurring. And so I just offer that for future consideration, because obviously what's done is done. I know there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to budgeting in government, and certainly when we have federal uncertainties, when we have cuts of our own. I know in the city we're going to be facing our own set of challenges with our budget this year, so it's not about whether or not we're all facing challenges. It's more to me about the process and making sure that we do our best to be transparent with the public and with what we're putting out there. In saying that, though, I do want to just highlight a couple quick concerns that I have, and then I'll dive into my questions. So from a concern standpoint, the one that jumps out to me is the home hospital program being cut 95%. I can tell you, and I'm biased in this way. I have a family member that participates in that program. And I can tell you that the families that take advantage of those programs, it is a significant resource for them. To see it go from, I think it's 36 and a half positions down to 2 in the proposed budget. First, it was painful to see that, but then I really wanted to understand what would potentially replace that, and if it's not being replaced, why not? So I'm going to let you answer that in a moment. The other concerns I have were around the Rochester International Academy being cut over 60%. The Refugee Program and Student Welcome Center, 100% cut. 52 positions cut for social and emotional supports. Decreased support for the help zones and other key services. And then a cut for food. I mean, as the cost of food rises, I'm just concerned that a 10.6% cut to food service would have a significant impact in our district. So, home hospital program, that's my question first. What will the district do to ensure that these students are being served? And what is the plan for all those students?
Yeah, thank you very much, President Melendez. So one of the things I do, if you allow me to sort of highlight something about transparency, that this board, as well as myself, pride ourselves on transparency. We have been utilizing each of our board meetings as an opportunity to take the community along the journey of our budgeting process. And while the budget book, which has been debated on for several years now, to my understanding, may not reflect what every person envisions it to reflect, we worked this year to reduce the number of pages and redundant information in our budget book based upon many of our parents through this budgeting process sharing with us that the document is too big. They want something that's very streamlined and gets right to the point. So in working to address that issue for parents who articulated that our previous budget books were too big, we most certainly work to address that particular concern. Understanding that there are still views that this budget book isn't quite where it needs to be, we most certainly will continue to refine this so not only council members, but our parents, our staff members, and others who have actually articulated that they appreciate the new streamlined budget book, that we find a happy medium between everyone. Now, to address the home hospital, let me sort of take you through the journey of the Rochester City School District, particularly as it relates to the publication of this book. Given the fact that the Rochester City School District is a state-monitored district, we have the task, which is written in legislation, of producing a balanced budget by March 1st. We all recognize that the governor releases her executive budget somewhere in January. I believe this year is around January 21st. We simply, from that point in time, had the responsibility of putting together a budget, a balanced budget, based upon the information solely in the governor's budget. Now, we all understand that the governor's budget, 98% of the time, is not the enacted budget of our legislators. Having the extreme pressure of putting together a balanced budget by March 1st did lead to us identifying areas that we knew would not remain cut in the way that they are, and that we knew that once we understood our revenue streams more, that those areas would be reinstated. So when we talk about the home hospital program, which is a program very dear to my heart as well, we recognize that we would not be bringing forward a final budget with that program being eliminated altogether. And a part of the $4.9 million, more specifically, $3.5 million of the school improvement funding that we received, we have to date reinstated 18 of those positions. We do have a plan, because I will share with you, having led that program for the Buffalo Public Schools for over 10 years, we do have a very expensive model here in Rochester. We have teachers who are providing a phenomenal service for our children, but we have teachers who have 1 or 2 children on their caseload each and every day, 5 days out of a week. Understanding that we need to develop equity, particularly on how our financial resources are spent, we are currently looking at developing a very similar model that you can find in Buffalo, which is found in Syracuse, in many other school districts, even as small as Poughkeepsie, where there are a core number of home hospital teachers. However, there are many more teachers who can provide home hospital instruction to students after the school day has ended. In addition to that, in looking at the data regarding our home hospital teachers, just beyond the fact that many of our teachers, not all of them, but many of our teachers in home hospital only service 1 or 2 kids. There are some teachers that may service 3 children, that we do recognize that some of the students who have been assigned to home hospital should not be assigned to home hospital. We have other programs in the district in which those students should and could receive much more of a comprehensive educational experience to meet their needs. A part of the shifts that we are engaged in the Rochester City School District is to make sure that the status quo that has been in place for quite some time here in Rochester is no longer the status quo that we apply to our children. Because when we look at our graduation rate of 60%, when we look at our state assessments that did increase a little bit over last year, but we are at the bottom of the big 5 when it comes to academic achievement. So something must change. And what I'm here to share with you and all is that we are looking at every aspect of the organization from A to Z and are making recommendations so that Rochester is no longer last when it comes to the Big 5. Rochester is no longer a state-monitored school district. Rochester no longer has a legal consent decree. Rochester no longer has multiple caps, which are areas of improvement that Rochester, based upon what we're looking to deliver, that is student-centered for our children, is a school district that is no longer losing enrollment, but increasing enrollment because parents are seeing the Rochester City School District as being a school district that is their first choice versus the conversations that we hear in our community about the Rochester City School District. So, as I mentioned in my opening, we are making some very difficult changes, some very difficult decisions. We recognize that change is not easy, and you can best believe that anything that I engage in, I'm never going to hurt a single child. My work, my commitment, all these years in education has been to elevate student success. And we will continue to do so as a school district unified in making our children's life trajectory one in which we can all celebrate and appreciate, but more importantly, that they will then be able to not only take their diploma and celebrate their diploma, but also celebrate the fact that they can do something with the skills and the competencies that they've learned while they're in the Rochester City School District.
Thank you, Superintendent, for that answer. I mean, I appreciate it. I certainly believe that, and every member of council, I'm sure, believes that we want RCSD to be successful. We know that academics is the priority. That being said, I still struggle with, and I understand there's been some restoration, but I still struggle with a 94.6% cut to the most vulnerable students in the district. That's just me personally. And I hope that we can, that you all can continue to try to investigate how you restore as much of that as physically possible for those students, understanding the challenges of budgeting and constraints that you do have. I do want to ask, and I'll yield the floor after this. I have additional questions, but I'll let others jump in. So I do want to ask about the changes to counselors and social workers. My understanding that on some level, resources that we've received recently in this community have been tied to ARPA dollars and other sort of we'll say limitless to some degree, resources. But it is a significant cut to go down about $3 million in funding. It looks like roughly 45 guidance counselors and social work positions are on the chopping block. Could you maybe speak to the funding sources related to that, as well as what efforts are underway to attempt to restore those positions?
Great question, and thank you very much for the opportunity, particularly to provide clarity to the general public, because there's been a lot of conversations in our community about what the Rochester City School District has done. But as I have continued to articulate and will continue to articulate, that our budgeting process will be final once we receive the full understanding of what our state aid allocation and additional funds will be. Understanding that, we engaged in what we called an equity-based staffing allocation model. We looked at student enrollment, and as a part of our academic plan that's been provided by our state monitor, which has been approved by our state, we have an obligation to staff based upon enrollment. When we looked at our school staffing model from previous years, there was really no rhyme or reason as to why certain schools had the appropriations that they had. When we asked questions of our building principals articulated this is what was allocated to us. And mind you, we do have new building principals who may not understand the history of things. But there was really no rhyme or reason that showed a clear picture on how our schools were staffed. Even when we revisited the school-based staffing model that has been in place for years here in Rochester, there was really no rhyme or reason. You couldn't connect the dots easily. So we revisited the school staffing allocation model. And to ensure equity, if I have a child that goes to school A and I have another child that goes to school B, that they should be staffed equally. Now, we do recognize that our students may present certain challenges that may impede their academic growth. When we staffed for this draft budget, understanding that we're going to receive additional dollars, that our budget book clearly reflects our staffing equity model. It does not reflect areas in which we know we need to then appropriate additional staff to then support the unique and varying needs of our students. With the $4.9 million, 3.5 that came through school improvement grants, as well as an additional $1.4 million that came forward from receivership dollars, we have allocated additional resources, be them dollars, be them staff members, to then address the needs of our children. Is the work done? No, because the work won't be completed until such time that we receive a full understanding of what the legislative enacted budget will be. So as it relates to school counselors, as it relates to social workers, in our March 2nd document, in which I did share with a few of you, we saw a decrease in social workers of 30.2 positions. At the time of the publication of this book, and I'm just talking general funds, at the time of the publication of this book, that number had reduced to 25.5. As I sit before you today, that number stands at 11 social workers, 3 of which are being reduced purposely because we have just closed Northwest Middle School, or we will be closing Northwest Middle School, and therefore the 3 social workers allocated to that particular building will no longer be needed for that particular school. Our goal, and you asked a question around funding and funding streams, our goal is to continue to advocate for each and every child. We consider ourselves to be champions for children, and I consider myself to be the chief ambassador of the children of the city school district of Rochester. So my work, along with my colleagues' work, really still focuses on and continues to advocate for more funding. I speak weekly with members of our local delegation, providing them with helpful information to then advocate more for the Rochester City School District. I've gone to Albany, I've gone to Washington, D.C. to advocate for more federal funding for public education, and I will continue to advocate. One of my responsibilities as superintendent is to continue to advocate for more and more and more for our children, so that every child, not some children, but every child has a high quality educational experience. And that's been and will continue to be my focus as an educator.
Thank you. Before I yield, just one final comment. The equity model that the district is using, I heard you say equity and equal in the same sentence, and I just want to offer for all of your consideration that equity doesn't always mean equal. Sometimes we have to invest in places where there's underutilization or under-resourced, either school buildings or programs and services, and I just don't like those 2 words kind of mixed in the same sentence.
And my apologies, if I can just give an example. So with our social workers, we have 9 buildings right now based upon only having 11 that are cut from our building. I say right now because that may change based upon financial resources. But a part of that equity model that we have employed, we saw 9 schools lose a percentage of a social worker, if not a full social worker. But with this equity model based upon need of the student population, we see 5 schools that are now gaining more social work services, and the same thing applies for our school counselors, our interventionists, our instructional coaches, our reading specialists, and every entity that is placed in the building to then be able to meet the varying and evolving needs of our children. So I appreciate you correcting me on the equal. I didn't mean equal in terms of just leveling the playing field, but also to share with you that our definition of equity is aligned.
Councilor Martin.
Thank you all so much for being here and your work on this budget. I definitely understand that it is a difficult budget year and folks are trying their best to make ends meet. My first question is around the framework you all used for determining what areas to cut. I understand that for some of them, as you've explained, you anticipate that funding will come and essentially it'll be closer to what it was last year. But what is the general framework you used for determining which areas would see cuts?
That's a great question. So when we started the budget process, we were very focused on identifying what we consider to be essential and non-essential positions. We've gone through the organization looking at non-essential positions as our first priority, making sure that non-essential positions that were in central office, non-essential positions that may have been at the school level, that those were the first positions that we looked at. Those positions we cut. We were then left with the very difficult decision around how do we close this budget by March 1st? And in looking at protecting the classroom as best as we can, making sure that the district's priorities as it relates to the academic areas were not impacted, that we then said, okay, these are some areas in which we all know are areas that are going to still support our students. And given the fact that we didn't have the revenue to support them at the time of the published book, those were the positions that unfortunately ended up being published. And the reason why I say unfortunately, because if we think about the timeline for the state to approve its budget is April 1st. We were placed in a predicament where we didn't have any information from the state, and we had to publish our budget book based upon being a state monitored district, that we knew that once we received additional dollars, that many of these positions would be reinstated.
That's helpful. And can you define essential versus non-essential, or give some examples?
Yeah. So non-essential positions are individuals, educators, whose roles primarily involve around clerical, administrative, or operational tasks. So they're not positions that essentially reflect the person's qualifications or their certification area. Essential positions are those who are providing direct services to our children so that our children have exactly what they need. As I mentioned, the team and I, early in the process, developed a document that outlines what we define as being essential and non-essential positions. And we have still a number of non-essential positions in the district, but reflected in this budget, there are major cuts to those non-essential positions. And if I could say this real quick, and I don't want to hijack, one of the things that I will say, particularly about this budget, which is a grave concern to me, and we are actively working to address it, is the explosion of the work that is happening around students with exceptionalities. While the team worked feverishly to identify those non-essential positions, those positions evaporated when we then had to add 75 plus special education positions to our budget. So we understand that as a school district that we need to get a better handle on what's happening with our program for students with exceptionalities. And one of the things that myself, members of our board, as well as my team have discussed is engaging in a full audit of our special education program, because I think that there are greater efficiencies there. And more importantly, there are some structural and programmatic things that we need to do differently to better guarantee that our children who are placed in special education receive the support that they need at the time that they need it, and that they're not relegated to a life of a classification. We all recognize as educators that special education should not be a program, but it should be a service by which the service is provided to those who need it. And then once that service is provided, that they then are then able to transition to least restrictive environments.
That's helpful. Thank you. Councilmember Gruber, how many questions are we each able to ask?
Well, if you could ask one more, then we can circle back for more afterwards if you'd like.
Sounds good. Thank you. The president pointed out concerns with closing the Rochester cuts to the Rochester International Academy. I share those concerns alongside the cuts to the refugee programs and student welcome center. So what now happens, since right now there is an expectation of 100% cut to that program?
Yeah, thank you very much. My apologies, President Melendez, for not touching upon that. So one of the things about the RIA program, which is the Rochester International Academy, when I came on board, there had been a lot of conversations between the New York State Department of Education as well as the Rochester City School District with meeting what they consider, when I say they, the New York State Education Department considered compliance as it relates to student civil rights, as well as a number of different other areas in which the district unfortunately had not yet achieved. What we've been able to do, and the reason why in this book it shows that the RIA program has these cuts, is that we've been able to comply with the New York State Department of Education with providing this program within the body of a school. Right now, the program in some ways sits on its own on the Jefferson campus, which is what the state has articulated as a violation of their civil rights, and also has threatened the district that if we did not change, then we would be fined $1 million, at least $1 million, because of the non-compliance. We were able, in collaboration with what we call the RIA Advisory Group, which is a number of individuals who are community-based along with the building principals and others, to look at our model and identify East High School as the new home for RIA. Currently, we have students who are in the RIA program over at Jefferson. They may start their day over at East, or they may start their day over at RIA, but they go back and forth between RIA and East. This provides a greater opportunity, particularly for who I consider to be new Americans, to receive additional programming, such as the wonderful programming, CTE programming, over at RIA. We have students who are now participating in the audition process over at SOTA. And while they were over at RIA, previously, they didn't have these same sort of opportunities. So while it reflects these major cuts, it's not really a cut. We're looking to transition the program with full supports, social worker, building administration, teachers who understand the language. We're transitioning that entire program over to the East Campus. So when we talk about the operational dollars, clerical support, custodial supports, all that no longer needs to be budgeted, because in our consolidation, which we're going to have more conversations about as we look at our 5-year projection, but our consolidation of that program is realizing cost savings to the district. And to your other point about the actual Welcome Center. So the Welcome Center was under a grant. The grant we knew was expiring. We have since received notification that our, what they call refugee funding, is being allocated again for this upcoming school year. And those changes are not reflected in the budget book, because those changes, the confirmation that those dollars were coming to us was not received at the time of publication.
So as of now, just because it's connected to this, the Refugee Welcome Center will be funded.
It's my understanding, it's a yes.
Thank you.
Because there's a number of different refugee grants that we've received, and there's still some more that we are waiting for.
Thank you.
Councilmember Monroe.
Thank you, Superintendent Rosser, for being here, as well as President Simmons. I have a number of questions. We'll see how many Councilmember Gruber lets me say.
Start with 2 or 3, please.
Okay. So first, I just wanted to point out, as we talk about the 5-year enrollment projection, that is something that is no longer in the budget book, so that if we're talking about, what's going to happen with properties going forward, we don't have that 5-year projection anymore.
5-year projection on the enrollment, you said?
Yes. What are the parent centers?
Oh, I didn't know if you had additional.
Oh, sorry, yes, just what are the parent centers?
So parent centers are really a wonderful opportunity for us as a school district to make investments in supporting our parents. Similar to what is in place in Buffalo, New York, similar to what's in place in Atlanta, Georgia, similar to what's in place in Washington, D.C., and also similar to what's in place in Poughkeepsie, New York. Parent centers provide an opportunity for the district to provide essential resources to our families. So if we have a family that is having challenges with navigating the school district, these are centers where parents will most certainly be able to go to receive those supports. In addition, given the physical place of the center also provides opportunities that are really to our dreams. Particularly with working with community-based organizations, they can serve as a one-stop shop. So if a parent is having challenges, as we used to say in Buffalo, with finding housing, or they have a challenge with a housing conviction notice, that in our partnership with legal aid, that the parent can come to the center to then receive support to help them navigate the situation. In addition to that, understanding that unfortunately, in this day and age where food insecurities continue to persist in a country where we're just so wasteful when it comes to food, that each of our parent centers will also have food pantries by which our families can then also go to this center to receive support. We've been in conversation with a number of community-based organizations and also civic or municipal entities. We had a conversation with the Board of Elections, and what we're discussing at these parent centers, that people will be able to go there to understand what their voting rights are and to fill out their voting cards. In addition to that, parent centers also provide great opportunities for what we call parent university, where parents will be able to select workshops. It may be a workshop on financial literacy. It may be a workshop on how to work toward owning your own home. It may be a workshop on the new math. It provides an opportunity for parents to then have a resource and workshops that are catered to their needs so that they can then be empowered to then better and with more of a stronger effort support the needs of their children.
Are these located then in the satellite registration locations that we used to have? I know there was one on Hart Street, and I'm not sure where the others were. Is it modeled?
Yeah, so right now, the parent centers that we are looking at for this upcoming year, one will be located on the campus of Loretta Johnson Middle School. There is a separate building that's adjacent that used to be the Swan location. We have transformed that, and it should be opening up relatively soon to support families. And the second parent center that we are exploring at this point in time, but given our budgetary challenges, we may delay opening, will be on North Clinton Street, where our current Reese's program is. As we all know, that neighborhood can most certainly benefit from a center that will most certainly provide resources, be them adult education resources, be them homeless resources, So we're exploring that right now, but it may not open based upon some of our other budgetary priorities for next year. But the Loretta Johnson will most certainly open because it's underway right now to open up before the beginning of the school year, the next school year, that is.
And when we talk about the equity-based per pupil allocation, some time ago when Jean-Claude Brizard was the superintendent, he had put forth a per pupil allocation that was set up kind of where if the building principal had their bottom line of how much money they needed, they were kind of picking students so that if there was a student who needed special services, they had a higher per pupil that went with them. Is this the same type of a thing?
Yeah,
or?
If you were to look on page 11, just to take everyone's attention there. So on page 11, the per pupil allocation is stated there. And one of the many things I'm proud about with this budget, this incomplete budget, is the fact that for this upcoming year, we have increased the student per pupil allocation. Several years ago, it was at $140 for every student. This year, it was at $150 for every student. Next year, as a part of our draft budget, it will be at $160. For students with exceptionalities, it will be an additional $60, up from $40 from previous years. And one of the things I'm most proud about is recognizing that our L students have a great need in our district based upon test scores and dropout rates and graduation rates. We've been able to double that per pupil allocation to an additional $60, bringing it in line with our special education allocation.
So how does that work for, say, our expeditionary schools, which I understand also have to pay a certain amount for their license agreements to be official expeditionary schools and additional training that goes with that, as well as SOTA, which has, the full musical instruments and things that we don't offer at our other schools?
So one of the things that these dollars give building principals the ability to do, it gives them more money to then be able to allocate to things that they know will most certainly meet the needs of their student population. When we talk about our specialized programs, such as SOTA, such as School Without Walls, such as early college, those programs also have additional resources that are allocated based upon the nature of their school environments.
Okay.
Last question here, Councilmember Monroe. We'll circle back.
Okay. So for Flower City, number 54 on Otis Street, we have a problem where, you're probably aware of it, behind it is a small street, Chase Street, and it bisects the school. It separates the school from where the playground is, and that there are people who speed along there, and that it's very dangerous for the kids. Has anyone been working with the city DES to maybe take care of that problem? Or I suppose it would be an expensive option, but flip it so that the parking is over where the where the playground is, and the playground back where the parking is.
So the answer to your question is yes, we have been working on it. And to provide a little bit more detail, I'm going to ask Chief Scott to approach the microphone. Or is the microphone back there? No.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
Good to see everyone. Yes, we've to answer that question, we've been working with Kabute and his team around putting up some additional fencing, but also trying to work at possibly putting fencing so we can maybe cut off that particular street during school hours. Of course, we have to work with the firefighting teams and things of that nature, just to talk around what the emergency response would look like. But we've actually had some meetings with the RCSD and the city as well, with Kabute and also Shirley Green and her team, on what we can do to better secure that space over there now. Currently we have a few barriers, of course, but that certainly doesn't refrain, unfortunately, vehicles that are going down that particular street. So we are working right now and meeting periodically on what we can do in order to put more safeguards over on Otis Street.
And just for other people, part of the problem too is that there is one house on this street. So so we can't just cut off access to it for cars.
Yeah. So we've been in conversation with that particular owner as well.
Oh, good. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Patterson.
Thank you. Before we get started, there's a bunch of young people in the back, and we never have young people at this budget hearing. Now, by now, y'all know you ain't gonna get away that easy, so you need to tell us who you are and why you here. One of you, speak up. Y'all all together, right? All right. So who? So. All right. So, okay. So, hey, who you, girl, and what y'all doing here? Okay. Cool. All right. Thank you. Glad y'all here. Well, wait, ain't my hearing. Stop. Wait. You're not my hearing. Sharon?
Pardon?
I just asked who they were. Now they want to talk. I can't say nothing. That's all.
You are all welcome to introduce why you're here. One of you pick a delegate and tell us why you're here.
And come to the microphone. Can they come to the microphone?
Thank you very much. So just so you know, we're not taking any money. No one up here is trying to take any money, but we do very much appreciate your advocacy and you being here. Thank you so much for speaking up and for being here. Councilmember Patterson?
Chairmember Gruber, if
Yes.
I may, for just one moment.
Sure.
I appreciate it because this is so unconventional. And so I want to just take part in
By all
the
means.
unconventional nature of this. I'm very excited to see you all on May 6th is the luncheon, right? Now, before we leave this evening, I want you to write down your name so that you have an opportunity to speak with us and we can really make sure you have a full understanding and that you are supported in the way that you need, okay? All right, thank you for coming and using your voices.
And if I can say before, of course, Mr. Patterson, if I can address the students, thank you very much for advocating on behalf of yourself. We're here as advocates, and for the student who's over at East, I will share with you, based upon our preliminary budget, there are no cuts to social workers or school counselors at East. Okay? Okay?
Thank you. Okay, back to the scheduled program. Councilmember Patterson?
Well, all right now. So I guess there's somebody out there from RCSD who's got a pad and getting these kids' names and everything. Okay. That was unplanned. Really was unplanned. All right. So since this is seems like all anybody's got for y'all today are rocks and sticks, let me start with a little bit of praise. First of all, I want to say thank you for partnering with us last summer in our literacy camps. You guys provided the educators and you provided the locations, and your educators were great. And when I say your educators, I mean teachers, the paras, everybody who worked collaboratively with our folks that we contracted to do that work were phenomenal. So I just want to thank you for that. Great work. And if we can partner with y'all, we're working on seeing if we can partner with y'all again, more to follow. But I just want to say thank you for stepping up and doing more than you had to. You didn't just welcome your kids, you welcomed all kids because they're all our kids, and there was no issue about who, where, what. And your staff taught everybody that showed up. So I just want to say thank you. So there's that part. Second thing I want to say thank you for is you have an amazing program running in my district, the Boys Academy. Commissioners, council members, make sure you find some time to get out to Brockport this summer. Boys Academy is a year-round program. It is not just a school year program. And there was some issue concerned about whether or not you guys would be able to continue the funding. It looks like you are. I want to commend you for that. I saw it maybe 2-3 years ago. I left crying because these boys are out there on a college campus all 4 days a week, 4 out of the 5 days a week for like 6-7 weeks. They're there and they are doing real academic work, and they enjoy it. They look forward to it. They strenuously participate in it. I was talking to Dr. Green at one point in time, and basically I kind of had a young man gently push me out the way because he wanted to read to Dr. Green, and I'm like, you got it, bro. Let me go. So I want to thank you for that commitment, for standing that program up years ago and making that commitment to make sure that it still continues to run. So I just want to start with some praise. Yes, sir.
If I can say one thing, one of the things is this is where the advocacy of our community is really going to prove beneficial to our children. The grant that's currently under the Boys Academy does end in the very near future. So one of the things as I continue to invite members of our community to do is to continue to advocate for more money to Rochester City School District. Doesn't mean that we won't receive it, but given the fact that the state is under some financial constraints itself, we're hopeful that the funding that's been provided to the Rochester City School District to support that program and others does not go away, that we hope that those dollars will most certainly continue to flow to Rochester, but we can better guarantee that collectively, if we continue to advocate and support our local delegation in their advocacy work for Rochester.
All right. Thank you, sir. So I got a lot of questions, but we'll just kind of stick with the two easy ones. So in your budget book, one of the elements that you have in each section for underneath schools are your financial summary. And one of the elements there is contractual services. What are those specifically? I mean, you've got compensation, equipment, contractual, and supplies. Well, 3 out of the 4, pretty simple. We can figure that out. I don't know what the other one is.
Yeah. So I'm going to have Mr. McDowell, give him a little bit of airspace to speak this evening, to sort of share with what the contractual line represents.
Can you hear me? There you go. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
All right. Thank you for the question. For the most part, the major increase in that line is for our temporary workers that we have from a place called TESS. So a lot of our paraprofessionals and individuals that we have some issues with hiring, they are represented in this line, and you'll see a major increase in those lines. Some of them are 100, 200%. That's where most of that cost is coming from, and then other contractual things that the principals in the schools are obviously paying for us.
Okay, so
One of the things that we wanted to do is to make sure that our building principals, and this goes to the transparency piece, making sure that when it comes to funds allocated and supporting schools, that's more transparent within the school-based budgets. Historically, those dollars were allocated centrally. So when I asked the question, when I came on board, how much money has a particular school used for temporary employment services? It's very difficult, not very easy to get the answer. I did eventually get the answer, but one of the things that we wanted to make sure that as best as we can is to decentralize cost centers and place them where the costs are being expended.
okay, it's a follow-up just on this specific point because I just want to understand this, and then I have one more question, and well, I got a lot more questions, but I'll surrender the mic. Okay, so contractual are your paras and your other folks, or who specifically are your contractual service people or elements that you can use to spend those dollars?
They can be paras primarily, and this is a good plug for us to, indicate to members of our community that the Rochester City School District is always hiring, particularly paras, because it's been very difficult for us to secure paras over the past years. So the contractual lines really reflect our paras because we have a separate line for substitute teachers, we have a separate line for substitute administrators, but the contractual line primarily services and supports our paraprofessionals.
So your paras
And clerical.
So your paras and your clerical are not included in your full compensation line. It includes all of those other elements?
It is in our contractual line because we are responsible for paying the contract rate.
Okay.
It wouldn't be in compensation because compensation only reflects our full-time employees along with their benefits.
Okay, so these are not the folks who are members of your union. These are the folks who are they work for a temp agency.
Correct.
Okay, I got that. Okay, that makes sense. I understand that. Okay, well, I'm a district council member, as y'all may have noticed, so I'm going to ask you some district council member questions. So I'm going to start with number 9 school. Wonder why I'm starting there. I'm starting there for a simple reason. We're looking at a decrease in funding for number 9. And what's kind of shocking and off-putting with that decrease in funding for number 9 is that there is a significant increase in per pupil, and the number of pupils attending number that you have budgeted, you have scheduled to attend number 9 next year. So you're going from $7,225,625 to $6,979,026, a decrease of $245,899, and you're going for an increase of you're going from 555 students this year to 640 students next year. And yet and it's going to sound like I'm beating you up, but you're telling me it's an equity funding model, and then I come down to some of my other schools in my district, and I'm seeing more increases in students, and I'm not seeing anything that looks like a proportional, balanced, like it. I'm looking, and again, I have to trust that the state monitor and the commissioners are all over this, because because one group is duly elected people whose responsibility is to look at all of this and hold and make sure it all makes sense, and the other person is the person who is appointed by the state of New York to make sure it all makes sense. So I'm going to ask, and if whatever answer you can give me that kind of makes sense, and if you need to follow up in writing, I'll happily take that.
I can give you a legitimate answer.
Okay.
So there is a reduction of 3.6 staff members at that building, and those are special education staff members that are no longer needed based upon the continuum at that school. The other thing, and I'm going to go back to what I stated earlier about these school-based budgets. These school-based budgets do not reflect the entirety of what we're investing in each of the schools, because once again, the entire document is based upon the governor's run. As I mentioned, we have $4.9 million that we've appropriated to each of these schools. And the number that you see right now reflected in the loss of revenue for this particular school will not be the number that is there when we present to the board and ultimately to the council our final budget, because it will then be reflected of the $4.9 million and any additional information that we receive related to revenue streams to the Rochester City School District.
So what should be the model for understanding what, to Council President Melendez's point, not equal funding, but equitable funding, and understanding how that works? And if you can send that to us in writing so we can get it, or if one of the board members wants to explain it, because that's what y'all do.
Yeah, and we have a three-tier model for providing additional services based upon student need and student, which is defined by student accountability status. So we appropriate additional supports to schools who are in receivership. We appropriate additional funds and supports to schools who are CSI, schools that are TSI, and schools that are LSI. Each of them basically receives funding and staffing support based upon their state designation, which is a reflection of the student need within each of those buildings. And that's not totally reflected in here, because we have not, at the time in which we published this book, we had not received the additional confirmation of the funding, such as the receivership funding, such as the school improvement grant funding. But we do have a three-tiered model by which we appropriate funds, additional funds, as well as additional resources. In addition to that, we also have our community school model, in which we also would appropriate additional staffing as well as funds for each of our community schools as well.
All right, thank you, sir.
Yeah, we may ask for that if there's something to be shared about that three-tiered model in writing. That may be a follow-up that we ask for. Mm-hmm. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for all the hard work that you do on behalf of our children and families. I really appreciate it. I saw that you guys had a cut to the violence prevention services. And it does say that New York State Department of Education has an RFP, and you guys had, I guess, until today to apply. Do you know?
Last week. It was either last week or last week and a half. Okay. That we had to apply.
So did you guys apply for that?
Most certainly. We're advocates for children. We're going to make sure that we try to get as much funding in the Rochester City School District to address the needs of our children. So yes, the team has applied for those dollars, and we are hopeful that we will be the recipients of those funds once again.
And if you guys do not receive those dollars, what is the plan to keep our children?
The plan is to continue to look at additional financial revenues. You know, we have discussed ways in which we can identify additional financial streams, be them through the philanthropic lens, locally, or even state or federal level. One of the things that's critically important with the new work shouldn't say the new work, the enhanced work that is happening here in Rochester is that we are very serious with taking a school, home, and community approach, because we realize that the Rochester City School District may not be able to provide everything for children, nor should it be seen as an entity to provide everything for children. When we look at statistics, we recognize that based upon Harvard research, that 80% of our children's waking hours from kindergarten until 12th grade is spent in the community, whereas 20% is spent within the four walls that we call school. If we embrace the model that the school district is going to do everything for every child, then I can share with you that we've already lost the challenge or the fight for our children. So we're embracing how might we be able to better partner with community-based organizations. How might we be able to strengthen our partnership with the city and the county so that we can better align and coordinate our services so that there's not duplication of effort, but there's pure communication and collaboration between these entities to be able to meet the holistic needs of our children, so that when it comes to our collective impact is much stronger than our individual impact.
I appreciate that. May I ask one more question? Of course. I noticed that charter schools account for a large part of your budget. Can you tell me, what is the district doing to attract and to keep students in our schools?
Yeah. So one of the things that is not, we haven't rolled it out yet, but we've been having some deep conversations, and is also a part of the state monitor's academic plan, that we need to develop a strategy to recruit and to maintain our current enrollment, or recruit from charter schools and also maintain our current enrollment. Some of those strategies, of course, is looking at our school day. We recognize that many of our schools release at 2 o'clock, and if I'm a parent and I'm a working class family who has to work during that period of time, it may be very difficult for me to coordinate trying to get my child picked up from school or my child being delivered on the bus from school. So what we're looking at doing, and of course this is going to take a lot of work and it's going to take some time, is to see how might we be able to expand our after-school programs or partner with community-based organizations who are currently providing after-school programming so that there's a seamless transition from the school day to after-school programming. In addition to that, as you all know, many of you are Rochester City School District graduates. You know that there are many great things happening in the Rochester City School District. And unfortunately, those things are not always celebrated or talked about. We as a community, and I say we because I am a part of this community, we as a community sometimes are highlighting the negative things, which are then, of course, having a unintended consequence on who chooses to come to the Rochester City School District and who chooses not to. We know that there's great things happening each and every day with our children. We are planning a strategy to then be able to highlight and broadcast those things so that the narrative of the Rochester City School District is owned by the Rochester City School District, and the counter narrative, which ticks me off, the counter narrative then begins to take its place in the darkness where it needs to remain, because there are great things that are happening in the Rochester City School District. We have great teachers, we have great administrators, we have great support staff, we have individuals who dedicate and sacrifice their personal lives to make sure that our children have what they need. So we have a whole strategy that we're working on, and we're looking to roll that out next year as well.
Thank you. Final question.
Sure.
At a high level, if you can, how would you say this budget is going to make schools better for families?
Okay, great question. So one of the things too, and I'm glad that you asked that, because there's been so much attention on social workers, school counselors, that no one has brought any sort of gripe about what we're doing with the instructional program. There are a number of things that we're making investments in as it relates to the instructional program, and we know that we have to take a balanced approach. First and foremost, we're an educational institution. We do recognize that we do need to address the social emotional needs of our children. That needs to be balanced, not only in the school district, but also through community supports. So one of the things that we're doing, there's an increase in the number of instructional coaches that we have supporting developing the capacity of our classroom teachers. We have reading specialists that are there to provide greater supports, literacy supports for our children. We have interventionists, so those students who may be challenged academically, we have them budgeted. We have behavioral specialists, autism specialists. We have a whole litany of supports that are outlined in our preliminary budget, and there's more work that we're still doing with this in our preliminary budget to most certainly elevate student success academically in the Rochester City School, or throughout the Rochester City School District. Thank you.
President Simmons, what is the schedule for you all to vote on this budget?
Thank you for your question. So we're expected to vote on the budget May 5th, as now that is the date we have on the calendar. We're having some deliberations. So tomorrow evening we'll be deliberating further, and we actually scheduled in an additional deliberation this week on April 30th, and we'll be having more discussion to determine our direction from there.
I mean, clearly the highlight from Dr. Rosser's comments is that this is an incomplete budget. Your words, not mine, that you're waiting for the state to have their final budget before you all know what the real numbers are. What happens if the state budget is not complete by May 5th?
Well, as I stated in my opening statement, and I think that's a really good question, which is we don't expect or anticipate that this budget will be drastically different than what we see. However, as dollars are coming in, we are looking to understand the plans and what pieces will be changed or modified as a result of. So there's different strategies that we're leaning into, and I think that our deliberations this week will reveal more information, but I have also taken notes on some of the things that you've talked about regarding the narrative and understanding what the plans truly are surrounding this budget.
But if the state budget is not complete by May 5th, you will still proceed with voting on the budget as is?
We may request an extension. So there are conversations with the state monitor that I've had, and that we as a board need to make a collective decision on the direction we would like to go around with.
Got it.
That. Yep.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
I have one more set of questions that I really would like to ask, and I would ask other council members if people want to. I'll swing it back down the line if people want to ask one, maybe two more. But given that we all know this is an incomplete budget, I'm not sure how useful it is to continue to go down to the very very weeds on this. But I'll leave it to you all. Let me start with a series of questions about one thing that has not been talked about yet, which is the fund balance. Mm-hmm. So can you share what is the fund balance right now?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and take it, because you have it
right now. Right now it's approximately $312 million.
And if I can also add, in your book, in the materials that we handed out, if you look at the behind, there's a document that actually outlines what is restricted and what is unrestricted.
Got it. And I've been trying to make sense of the letter from Commissioner Rosa, and I guess this is my kind of, so it's $312 million, which, I'll just be very transparent. I think that it is, Dr. Rosser, I will present this comment to the monitor over there. Mr. Alessi is smiling at me. I welcome you to come to the podium if you'd like. I do think $312 million is an unreasonable fund balance. I recognize that there's always concern that the sky is falling, and the sky very well may fall for urban education. So I completely understand. Oh, Dr. Alessi, if you'd like, you can find any seat with the microphone, but Dassey will do her best to work her magic. I guess what I really want to understand is this letter seems to be a letter from Commissioner Rosa about a conversation she had with you to President Simmons that essentially is saying, don't use any fund balance on the budget. And before I ask the monitor to weigh in, I guess what I'd like to understand from Dr. Rosser, President Simmons, is this letter, which I guess it only came in a couple of days ago, but what is your policy or your intention or your philosophy around the fund balance? Before we get to what the state's telling you, I want to understand what your just philosophy is.
Yeah, one of the things, and you'll see it in the highlight in the materials that have been presented to the board and our community about our budget process, what is stated in the document that we're going to take a disciplined approach to using fund balance. And that disciplined approach is with certain guardrails. Those guardrails are that the expense is not a reoccurring expense, that is something that we can use for one-time shots, that we're not looking to deplete our fund balance because we recognize that as we understand the state and federal financial streams may come in bigger jeopardy in future years, and is our intent to protect student programming and support, the fund balance will be used as needed. So state monitor can, you want to?
I do want to touch on that, and I want to recognize also that the history of this district, and we've had many deliberations here respectfully, and our past board president, Elliott, with respect, has always had the philosophy, stay away from the fund balance. And the reason that they also want to make sure that the fund balance is upheld or that we are strategically staying away as much as possible is because the RCSD has a history of kicking the can down the road when it comes to making the decisions that have to be made. And oftentimes these cuts are uncomfortable and they, folks are struggling with them. And some of those decisions, we see the remnants of them where those decisions were not made and we end up in financial crisis. And so the community is often asking, what is happening at the Rochester City School District that year after year we find ourselves in these financial situations? Because the decisions that needed to happen have not happened. And so now we're trying to make decisions, and no decision is going to be perfect. But those decisions are here and they're now, and we're trying to do the best we can with that. But I think that's a fair question, but that's the position around the fund balance. And I think the state monitor will be able to give a better understanding around why that restriction is there.
Yeah, I'd like to get to the state monitor in 1 second. I just want to comment. When we're talking about the cuts of the home hospital program and the guidance counselors, which are certainly the ones that are the most high profile right now, I hear you talk, Dr. Rosser, about how $4.9 million gets to reinstate more than half. So I presume it's only another $4 or $5 million that is the gap for those services. Is that right? Not. It sounds to you mentioned the $4.9 million that you guys are receiving, and said that you're already receiving that, and you mentioned that seems to constitute a bit over half of the positions that may have had to be cut, right? So I presume it's another $4 or $5 million that ultimately makes it so there's no cuts. I mean, we're talking about a $312 million fund balance, and we're talking about $4 or $5 million. I totally get your perspective that you don't want to use fund balance on things that are recurring costs, and I understand that you may have a district right now that is staffed in a way that is not sustainable for the future, and I would beg and implore. I mean, I shudder to think what happens to a school like Jefferson when Rhea leaves. There's lots of facility things that I think we'd all talk about us wanting and needing to do together as a community. But the idea of not using $4 million in fund balance out of 312 feels to me like it's not a reasonable choice. It doesn't feel like it's your choice either. So now I want to move it over to.
This is a very important conversation. So that we place things in with greater context. And I know that you don't have the information in front of you, but we have $126 million in unassigned fund balance. So when we speak about the 312, $186.6 or $187 million is restricted to certain lines that we can only spend it for certain things. But to your question around the $4 million, why won't we just simply take $4 million and to reinstate everything? One of the things that is of challenge to the Rochester City School District, if we do not change what we are doing today, our next year budget deficit is around 61 million. And if we don't change what we do today, 2 years from now is 84 million. 3 years from now is roughly 109 million. 5 years from now is $128 million. So we have to approach this through a balanced approach, because we do need to change in which the way we operate, because if we don't, the conversations in this room, the conversations in our community, and ultimately the district's ability to address the needs of our children is going to be a tremendous issue here in the city of Rochester.
No doubt. We have a 5-year budget gap that shows it escalates at the same kind of proportionality in the city of Rochester. We all have really hard decisions to make, and I'm not here to suggest what decisions you do or don't make. Again, I would argue that the bigger and more complicated decision is, when do you take a school like Jefferson and return it to the city? When do you take a school building like Marshall and return it to the city? And I understand those are hard questions, but in this particular case, we're talking about what at the end of the day is a fairly small amount of money in the grand scheme of even the unrestricted fund balance. So if you don't mind, Dr. Rosser, I do just want to ask Dr. Alicia to answer this question for me. Why is the state's position for the Rochester City School District to be so deeply conservative with such a significant amount of fund balance?
Thank you. Good afternoon.
We can hear you pretty well.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to address your questions. We are not opposed about using money from the fund balance. That has happened in the past. During the year 22-23, we allowed the district to use $10 million from the fund balance. 23-24, $5 million from the fund balance, and 24-25, $8 million from the fund balance. For this coming year, it is proposed to use $23 million from the fund balance, and that was the amount that I shared with the Commissioner of Education based on the budget that was submitted to me on May 2nd. We have had conversation because we don't know exactly how many revenues are going to come in from the state and what is going to happen in the future of the district. During the year 1920, the district ran out of funds, and they have to let a lot of people go. The superintendent just shared the 5-year projection plan, and when we add all that money together, it's over $400 million. Want to be accountable to the people in Rochester, and I want to make sure that the district does not face the same financial situation that they faced during the 1920 school year. Yes, they will be used from the fund balance.
2020.
We got to look.
2020, correct?
2020, yes.
Yeah.
We are working. I'm working with the board. I'm working with the superintendent. But we want to make sure that that money is used the right way, and that we are building capacity for the future of the district.
Any questions for the monitor, President Melendez?
Yes, thank you. I certainly appreciate the idea that we want to make sure that the district is sound long-term and that there's adequate resources to support the essential services of education, first and foremost. But I do ponder the question, after kind of hearing the full breadth of conversation today, whether or not, given that this might be a one-time expenditure, whether or not this is something, restoring some of the programs and services that are potentially being cut, whether that could satisfy the one-time request. And what I mean by that is, I think this might require the superintendent and the staff here to have some time to be able to find other sources of revenue longer term that would backfill some of the gaps in coverage that we're talking about, whether that is in guidance counselors or social workers or programs like the home hospital program. And given that the superintendent's only been here, 9 months, superintendent? Something like that? So, this is a reflection of the current realities, but it feels like given the significant pushback and feedback we've all received in the community around mental health and ensuring people have essential services, that this could be an opportunity to tap into the fund balance for the purposes of restoring essential services while this administration gets the opportunity to look at other sources of revenue to fill that gap long term. Could you react to any of that?
Again, as I said before, I'm willing to work with the superintendent, with the board. I can honestly tell you, hiring staff is not a one-time commitment. It is something that will happen year after year. There's contract agreements, there are negotiations and all that. So that is not a one-year commitment. If you tell me about a playground, if you tell me about a roof, if you tell me about other things, but those are one-time commitment. But I'm willing to work with the board. I'm willing to work with the superintendent, and I have been working with them to make sure that the students in the Rochester City School District receive quality education, the quality resources that they need to be successful. Because I always said, as the district goes, the city goes.
Absolutely. Thank you for that answer. I don't have any more questions for at this point. Thanks.
Any last questions from council members before we wrap it up? Councilmember Smith?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Did you guys discuss how you're going to support the agency youth? I see that there's a cut to services that would support our students who are in residential services and in foster care.
Yeah.
Can you guys speak to that?
Yeah, most certainly. One of the things that I've sort of talked about, Mark, is an approach to a more coordinated system of supports for our children. When we look inside the Rochester City School District, as well as, which is also reflective, inside the Rochester City School District, there are so many silos in our community, it kind of baffles me. We need to make sure that we are removing those silos and that people are working together. So when we speak about agency youth, we know that there are resources in agency youth that currently our Office of School Culture and Climate has. And in fact, when we look at the work of our Office of School Culture and Climate, they're doing a great bulk of the work for students who are transitioning back to the Rochester City School District from being in an agency. In looking at efficiencies, we saw that there was areas of consolidation, and as a part of our long-term plan for that division, we're looking at consolidating that division so that there is one leader who is then leading not only agency youth work, home hospital work, but also leading our work for school culture and climate and SEL supports for our children.
Thank you. Last question. Can you tell me when is the budget due? Like, I know you guys said that you may.
May 5th is when the board currently has adopted in its calendar to approve the budget. As President Simmons indicated, we have deliberations, internal deliberations, tomorrow and on Thursday, in which we will be having conversations around next steps, understanding that we have yet to receive, not information, we have yet to receive a final enacted budget from our state.
Councilmember Martin?
So you talked a bit about relying on the community based on how much time students spend in school versus the community. Can you talk about some recommendations you may have for us within the city about how to strengthen students and their families? What can we do to make sure we are partnering with you all?
Well, I can say that one of the things that attracted me to become superintendent here in Rochester is me getting an understanding of the rich resources that exist throughout the community, be it at the city level, be it community-based, be it mom and pop, or be it vested community member who has an interest in our children. For me, the work is already underway. We're having conversations with city government. In some cases, we're having conversations with council members around ways in which we can strengthen the impact of us working together on student needs. As I continue my tenure here in Rochester, and it will be a long tenure here in Rochester, what I'm envisioning is that we will have a system of coordinated supports. So instead of individuals operating in this area on their, what they consider to be or perceive to be their body of work, while we're over here working on what we perceive to be our body of work, developing a common vision, an agreed upon approach, and a commitment to do what's in the best interest of our children is what we are working to establish, not by ourselves, but in collaboration with community-based partners, vested members of our community, and others for our children. Because when I say our children, they're your children just as much as our children. They're the children of the city of Rochester, be them kids who are in the Rochester City School District or kids who are not. It is important that as adults in influential positions that we recognize, and I know that we all do recognize, but we recognize the power of us in addressing their needs so that when we're no longer in these positions, we have gone home, sat down somewhere with an understanding that we gave it our all, and the children who will then assume our positions will do what's in the best interest of our community.
Thank you. And my final question, it'll be around housing. That's something that the city and the county, the state, can play a role in. We learned that this year there's been an increase in the amount of unhoused students within the city school district. Yep. Can you talk about the impact you all are seeing on the ground, and I guess what strategies come to mind in supporting unhoused families and limiting the amount of working to decrease the amount of unhoused students in our community?
Yeah, so unfortunately, the issue of homelessness is something that's very real throughout our country. But when we look at what's happening here in Rochester, it's very real here, and we do feel it. We do see that a number of our children, over 1,400 students, have been identified as being in a homeless situation. One of the things that our Families in Transition Department continue to do, a yeoman's job, is to connect children and families to services. After reading, of course, President Melendez's report on homelessness, one of the many things that we've done, well, let me talk about the two major things that we did. We definitely pulled the director of Families in Transition and simply said, take a look at these recommendations. I personally had a conversation with Adam Bello to discuss, because there's recommendations that simply state that the school district should partner with the county on A, B, and C. So we're working hand in hand to make sure that those bridges are there for our families. And then the other thing that we did as a part of this budget, we also added an additional social worker to Families in Transition, given the fact that what we can expect, particularly under the Trump administration, is for many more families to find themselves in that predicament due to the policies around Medicaid and recertification and SNAP and all that. We wanted to make sure that we were providing additional supports to be able to support those families who find themselves in an unfortunate situation of homelessness.
Any final questions? If there are any final questions from folks that they don't feel they have the time to ask now, I don't want anyone to feel rushed. We can certainly ask questions in writing. We can share them with our staff who will get them over. President Simmons, I'd ask that you keep us posted on if your deliberation timeline changes at all. And certainly we look forward to hearing about what's happening with the district's budget. I think everyone up here feels the same way. We are all rooting for you all. I agree with the monitor's statement that as the district goes, so too does the city. I'll also share personally, as a bright note, that my son, who's a kindergartner in the Rochester City School District, gets on the bus every day with a gigantic smile on his face and comes home every day looking like he is wiped out. I can't ask for a better, for a better, yeah, that's right, thanks, Mike. I can't ask for a better experience, and I know that there are so many individual staff members who are trying their best to make things work. What I would ask for is to make sure that we have clarity as to what's going on in your budget. That's the whole argument about the narrative. We want to be able to tell our constituents what's going on. I want to direct them to a budget book where they can get some answers. And I really do hope that whatever kind of cuts are coming are minimized. I hope there's an appetite by the state to allow for more fund balance to be used, if that is what is required, to minimize any really, really harmful cuts on staff or schools. And someday, Dr. Rosser, will have to have more time to talk about what is the plan for the continuing right sizing of the district, which we didn't get to today, but certainly is part of the overall conversation, I'm sure. But in the meantime, we'll just say thank you. I'll turn to both of you if you have any closing remarks.
I just want to thank, first of all, again, my board colleagues for being here this evening as well as online, and thanking City Council for leaning in, having these very important conversations, because at the end of the day, we do want our community, our constituents to really understand what is happening so that we have a clear narrative and understanding around the direction of the Rochester City School District. I want to also acknowledge the power behind the superintendent and his team, how they have leaned in to try to make this budget work as we continue to wait on the dollars to come in and gain this understanding. These conversations will happen, and I will certainly be reaching out to you all to keep you abreast as to what our direction is.
So I want to say thank you very much for your time and attention. And while you are elected officials of the city of Rochester, I also recognize that you have obligations and responsibilities that span beyond, just your elected nature, with many of you having children here in the Rochester City School District. So thank you very much for everything that you do. I want to thank my board commissioners for all that they do in their elected capacities, and most certainly want to thank, the team that stands behind doing what's in the best interest of all of our children. So thank you very much, and we look forward to the continued engagement that is necessary. And, to your point about the budget book, I need to take a look to see how the city constructs this budget book, to see what things that we might be able to replicate moving forward.
Happy to talk about it at any point. And also, I know that Mr. McDowell and our budget director, Suzanne Warren, talk plenty, but she can share about the OpenGov software that we purchased. It may not be the right one for a school district, but it has certainly been advantageous for constituents to be able to go through our budget and ask and answer the questions on their own. With no further business, this concludes the Budget, Finance, and Governance Committee. We are adjourned.